The man who used to be my father gave my son a rock inside an iPhone box for his birthday and said, "Only good kids get presents." Everyone laughed, but 30 minutes later there was silence. "Go ahead, champ, open it." Ricardo's voice resonated with exaggerated enthusiasm as he slid the white apple box across the table to my son Mateo. The whole room fell silent, eyes fixed on the box as if it contained something magical. Mateo smiled, his chubby fingers trembling slightly as he removed the wrapping paper. "Is it really an iPhone?" he whispered, his 9-year-old voice filled with wonder. "Open it and see," Ricardo said, looking at me with a mocking smile over his coffee cup. "I should have known. I should have known." Mateo lifted the lid. His smile froze. Inside the pristine white iPhone box was a rough stone. Just a stone. A simple, dirty stone that looked like it had been plucked from the edge of any sidewalk. Mateo blinked at it, clearly confused. "It's a joke." Ricardo leaned back in his chair, laughing loudly, filling the room. "Well," he said, taking a sip of his coffee like a man who had just delivered the perfect punchline, "only good kids get presents, right, Mateo?" There was a moment of stunned silence, and then the room erupted in laughter. Elena laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes with a napkin. Javier snorted between laughs. Even Isabel shook her head and chuckled. I didn't laugh. Neither did Mateo. He kept looking at the stone, and I slowly watched him process it, the flush in his cheeks, the way his shoulders slumped. He pushed the box away without a word, just bit his lip and looked at me. I recognized that look in his eyes. It was the same one I used to have at his age. The same one I had when Ricardo used to do the exact same thing to me. "Oh, come on," he said, waving a hand with false sweetness. "It's just a joke. Cheer up." "Yeah, cheer up," added Elena, nudging Mateo with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "It's not your real present." I clenched my jaw because I knew there was no other present. This was the grand gesture. A stone in an iPhone box and a cruel joke at a child's expense. "Wow," I said quietly. "This time you really outdid yourself, Ricardo." He shrugged as if everything was perfectly normal. "Maybe next year he'll learn some respect, and then we'll see about the iPhone, eh?" That was it. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I looked back at Mateo, his head down, eyes wet but refusing to cry, and I felt something boiling in my chest, something that had been building for years. No more. I looked around at my father, so pleased with himself, at the relatives behind their wine glasses, the people who witnessed a child being humiliated and found it entertaining. They didn't know what was coming, but they would. Oh, they would. And 30 minutes later they weren't laughing anymore. I wish I could say this was new, that Ricardo humiliating a child, my son, was an anomaly. But it wasn't. This was the Ricardo show, same routine, different generation. See, when I was a kid he never hit me. He was too proud for that. His abuse wore a suit and tie. It came disguised as fatherly wisdom, as shame wrapped in tradition, and as a love that always had a price. "You're not like your brother," he'd say when I came home with a B instead of an A. "He's smart. You try. That counts too." I spent years trying to earn his approval. I got a scholarship, worked 3 jobs, built a company from scratch, and yet he'd call me lucky instead of intelligent, decent instead of persevering. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering was a chance to remind me that no matter what I achieved, I was still the family disappointment. And when I had Mateo, that should have changed things. It didn't. Ricardo barely acknowledged him. Never remembered his birthday. Never asked how he was doing in school. And when he did speak to him, it was always some backhanded comment. "Don't you think it's time he toughened up a bit?" he'd said once when Mateo cried over a scraped knee. "You're coddling him too much." Coddling? I was raising my son not to become him. And apparently that was a crime. So when he handed Mateo a stone in an iPhone box and laughed in his face, something inside me snapped. "You know," I said, standing up slowly, "it's funny. You've spent your whole life convincing everyone you're the strong one, the patriarch, the pillar of this family. But really, all you've ever been is a coward in a cardigan." The laughter stopped. Isabel's eyes widened. Elena choked on her wine. Ricardo sat back in his chair, narrowing his eyes as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Watch your mouth." "No, you watch yours," I said, stepping forward. You just humiliated my son in front of the whole family. And for what? For a laugh? For a moment of control to feel like a man again. I was joking, for God's sake. You weren't joking. You were performing just like you always do. Every time you find someone weaker, younger, someone who trusts you, you crush them with a smile on your face. Mateo was still silent, his small hand gripping the edge of the chair. I looked at him, then back at the room. You all saw it. Every single one of you. And you laughed. Silence. I smiled, but there was nothing kind in it. Want to know what's really funny? I actually did buy him an iPhone. A real one. It's in the car. I wanted Ricardo to have his moment. So I waited. Several gasps rippled through the room. That's right. I was going to let him give it to him. Thought maybe just once he'd act like a grandfather. I turned to Elena. But you laughed, Elena. You laughed like it was a comedy show. You, a therapist, should know better than anyone. Javier shifted uncomfortably. He always stayed on the sidelines, neutral like Switzerland, but tonight the air was too thick even for him. Isabel tried to intervene. Let's not do this now. It's Mateo's birthday. Exactly, I interrupted firmly. And you ruined it. I walked out without even grabbing my coat, went straight to the car, pulled out the real iPhone box and came back. I handed it to Mateo. This is for you. From me. Because you are a good kid. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. He blinked at me. Thanks, Dad. His voice cracked on the last word and I almost broke right there. Then I turned back to the room. You had your show. Now it's my turn. I pulled an envelope out of my back pocket and dropped it on the table. What's that? Ricardo asked, eyeing it like it was a bomb. It's the updated power of attorney. You're no longer included. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the house you co-signed on but haven't paid a dime on. The accounts you've been helping manage for Mateo's college fund. It's all over. You can't just. I can. And I did. Javier looked at Elena confused. Wait, what accounts? Elena's face paled. I saw the flicker of panic bloom in her eyes. Yes, I said. Maybe someone should have told you. Guess who's been dipping into the family trust behind your back? Keep quiet, Elena. No, I said, cold and lethal. You better keep quiet. The room wasn't laughing anymore. And I was just getting started. Ricardo's hand hovered over the envelope like it was radioactive. His jaw was tight, but he didn't open it. Because deep down he knew. He always knows when he's been caught. You're making a mistake, he said through gritted teeth. This isn't how you solve family problems. No, I replied, ice in my voice. This is how men solve problems when their family treats his son like garbage. I turned to Elena. Let's talk about that emergency withdrawal from Mateo's college fund. You told the bank you had my authorization. She froze. I needed it for Claudia's therapy. You needed it for your yoga retreat in Mallorca. You posted all about it on Instagram. Healing my inner child on the beach. Nice caption. Paid for with my son's education. Really? Javier shot up from the couch. What? You took money from Mateo's account. She tried to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. Euro 200. Gone. Forged my signature and said I authorized it. I have the bank report. The teller even remembered you. Said you were smiling the whole time. You're exaggerating. Elena shrieked, her voice cracking. It's not like I blew it all. You stole from my son. Don't stand there pretending it was a misunderstanding. Now Isabel tried to intervene, her eyes shimmering with manufactured tears. This is getting out of control. No, Mom. What's out of control is the fact that Ricardo has been using Mateo's social security number to open lines of credit since he was 5 years old. The silence was deafening. Even Elena sat down. Isabel looked at Ricardo. What is he talking about? I dropped a manila folder on the table. 3 credit cards. All with small limits. All maxed out. All opened in Mateo's name with his social security number and your address. Ricardo's face turned the color of chalk. You can't prove that. Already did. The bank was very cooperative when they realized a minor's identity was being used. You'll be getting a letter soon. You might want to clear your schedule. I raised you, he said, his voice low and shaky. And I trusted you, I replied, my voice hard. But you used my son to shield your pathetic credit history. You played grandfather of the year, while financially suffocating a 9-year-old. Isabel sank heavily into her chair. You've gone too far. No, I said, my voice steel. You went too far. Years of silent dinners where I was the butt of the joke. Years of being less intelligent than Elena or less charming than Dad. Years of paying for Christmas gifts you took credit for. Covering tuition for a niece who called me boring behind my back. Paying your property taxes just so you could go on cruises. I turned to face them all. And I did it. I did it all. Not because you deserved it, but because I held out hope that, just once, you'd look at Mateo and think, he's better than us. But instead you dragged him into the same toxic cycle I grew up in. Ricardo finally exploded. You're a selfish, bitter man. You want to destroy this family over a stupid rock in a box. I laughed. It wasn't a pretty laugh. It was feral. I'm not destroying anything. This family broke a long time ago. I'm just turning on the lights. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing now? Isabel asked, now in full panic mode. Sending a copy of this folder to the lawyer I hired last week. Also copying the bank's fraud department. Oh, and Child Protective Services, in case anyone needs to look into why my son's identity was being exploited. Elena stood up again. You're insane. I looked at her directly. No. I'm just done. Mateo was beside me now, the real iPhone in his hand still unopened. He reached up his small hand and took mine. Can we go, Dad? God, I almost broke. His voice was so quiet, so trusting. I nodded. As we walked towards the door, Ricardo's voice, now desperate, rang out. If you walk out that door, don't come back. I stopped. I turned. That choice was already made. The moment you laughed at my son. Then I looked at the others. Elena. Javier. Isabel. I'm not your punching bag. I'm not your backup wallet. And I'm not your scapegoat. I'm his father. And that's the only title that matters. And we left. The door closed behind us with a thud. The silence inside that house is probably still ringing. But outside in the parking lot, under the cool gray sky, my son looked up at me and said something I'll never forget. I'm glad you're my dad. It didn't take long for the storm to start. The next morning I got a text from Elena. You went too far. Dad is furious. Mom hasn't stopped crying. I didn't respond. By noon my inbox pinged. It was from the fraud department. The investigation was officially open. At 3 p.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Torres, this is Inspector Marta Ruiz from the Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to schedule a formal statement regarding the identity theft of your son. Boom. They thought I'd back down. Thought I'd let it go. But not this time. I wasn't going to swallow the pain. I was going to turn it into ammunition. In less than 48 hours, I filed a police report and handed over every single document I had. The bank statements linked to Mateo's social security number. Screenshots of the fraudulent college fund withdrawal. Video footage from the birthday party showing exactly what Ricardo did. The humiliation, the laughter. They laughed at a child. They stole from him. And now we were going to trial. The family silence lasted about a week. Then Isabel called. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was frantic, her words tumbling over each other as if she could outrun the truth. Honey, please, let's fix this as a family. Family doesn't go to court over mistakes. Your father isn't well. Elena is a mess. Just come home. Let's talk. I didn't even finish listening. That Sunday I got a letter. From my aunt, one of the few who hadn't been involved in the whole mess. Inside was a newspaper clipping. Ricardo Torres, longtime city councilman, hospitalized after cardiac complications. Family faces financial hardship following recent legal troubles. Below it, a link to a crowdfunding page. Goal: €40,000. Raise €3,200. Top comment: hope the son has the heart to forgive. Donation from Elena Torres. €10. Hope he gets a second chance as a father, as a grandfather. Pathetic. Days later, another call. Unknown number. My father. I wasn't going to answer, but curiosity, or maybe closure, made me slide my finger across the screen. Hello, son. The voice was weak, broken. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about it, what I did to Mateo. The stone, the way I looked at him. And I thought it was funny. But it turns out, I was cruel. Like I've always been. Silence. I don't deserve forgiveness. But if you ever show up, I'll know that this isn't over. That maybe I still have a chance with you. I took a deep breath. Mateo made a custom phone case at school, I told him. It says, only good kids get presents. That's good, he replied weakly. I asked him what it meant. He said it means bad grandfathers don't get grandsons anymore. Click. I didn't call back. A week later, I found myself in the old neighborhood. The same shopping center where we'd once gathered for Mateo's infamous birthday joke. I saw them. My family. What was left of it. Ricardo in a wheelchair. Isabel beside him. Elena handing out flyers. Help Ricardo Torres. Family comes first. I watched from across the parking lot. Elena saw me first. Her smile faltered. She rushed towards me. You came. I knew you weren't as cold as you pretended. I said nothing. We were wrong. All of us. But we're still family. No, I said. We were a cult where love was conditional and money was currency. And now the god you worship, status, control, image, has fallen. She blinked, stunned. This isn't about money. Then why does your flyer have a QR code and not an apology? She flinched. I turned and walked back to the car. Mateo was in the passenger seat, watching. When Elena saw him, she raised her hand to wave. He didn't wave back. Didn't even blink. Just looked at her like she was another stranger in the crowd. That was the moment I understood. Mateo had moved on faster than I had. We drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Ricardo trying to stand, hand outstretched as if he could pull me back in time. But I was already gone. That night, Mateo and I sat in our small living room with popcorn and a movie. Do you miss them? I asked. He thought for a moment. I miss who they could have been, he said. But I'm glad I have you. I felt a lump in my throat. He leaned his head against my shoulder. I put my arm around him and closed my eyes. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the disappointment. I wasn't the failure. I wasn't the loser. I was the father who showed up. The one who said enough. The one who finally broke the cycle. I wasn't losing my family. I was building a new one.